Deep in the shadows of the Zagros Mountains lies a cave that has held secrets for tens of thousands of years. Shanidar Cave, as it is known, has yielded some of the most astonishing evidence of Neanderthal life ever discovered, including hints of their intelligence, their social bonds, and even their possible reverence for the dead. But beyond the tools and bones, beyond the flowers that may have been laid in a grave, one question remains tantalizingly elusive. Who were the people of Shanidar Cave? Yet despite the wealth of scientific findings, misconceptions about Neanderthals persist, especially regarding their appearance. Recent reconstructions, such as that of Shanidar Z, depict Neanderthals with features that align more closely with modern populations. However, genetic evidence tells a different story. Studies indicate that Neanderthals were likely blue-eyed, fair-skinned, and even blonde-haired, traits often omitted from popular depictions. These reconstructions, particularly those created by Kennis and Kennis, contribute to a misleading narrative that distances Neanderthals from their true genetic legacy. Such artistic interpretations, while visually compelling, risk shaping public perception based on bias rather than scientific accuracy. And why has the image of Neanderthals, particularly their appearance, been distorted? In the Netflix documentary Secrets of the Neanderthals, a 75,000-year-old Neanderthal woman, dubbed Shanidar Z, is reconstructed from skeletal remains discovered in northern Iraq's Shanidar Cave. This reconstruction portrays her with a demeanor markedly different from early depictions of Neanderthals as primitive and unintelligent beings. The recent reconstruction of Shanidar Z invited viewers to empathize with Neanderthals, positioning them within a broader human history. Paleo-artist brothers Adrian and Alphonse Kennis, known for their lifelike reconstructions, crafted the Shanidar woman face using 3D scans and CT imaging. However, they acknowledge that certain facial features, such as the thickness of lips or the exact shape of nostrils and skin pigmentation, cannot be determined solely from skeletal remains, necessitating creative interpretation. This artistic freedom means that reconstructions like Shanidar Z are influenced by contemporary cultural norms and perceptions of emotion and identity. While these reconstructions can foster empathy and connection, they may also project modern demographics onto ancient humans, potentially misrepresenting historical realities. So, while technological advancements have enabled more lifelike reconstructions of ancient humans, it's essential to recognize the role of artistic interpretation in these depictions. Understanding this balance helps us appreciate both the scientific and creative aspects of bringing our ancestors to life. For example, genetic evidence has revealed that many Neanderthals had blue eyes, blonde hair, and fair skin, traits that are often absent in modern reconstructions. The recent reconstruction of Shanidar Z follows a misleading narrative that portrays Neanderthals with an artistic decision that lacks scientific backing. This approach, largely influenced by the work of Kennis and Kennis, perpetuates a false image of Neanderthals, emphasizing their supposed primitiveness rather than their biological reality. Kennis and Kennis also created the controversial and now debunked reconstruction of Cheddar Man, a 10,000-year-old Western hunter-gatherer from England. The brothers also created a reconstruction of a young Neanderthal man who lived in the Netherlands, known as the Dutch Neanderthal, which has a similar appearance to Cheddar Man. These artistic choices shape public perception and continue to distance Neanderthals from their true genetic heritage, obscuring the fact that they were far more similar to modern humans than often depicted. The Neanderthals of Shanidar were not the brutish creatures often depicted in popular media. Genetic evidence tells a different story. They had blue eyes, blonde hair, and light skin, traits they passed on to modern humans. This contradicts the misleading reconstructions often promoted by figures like Kennis and Kennis, who continue to depict Neanderthals with brutish features that align more with outdated, prejudiced views rather than scientific reality. The genes for light pigmentation in modern Eurasians did not emerge from nowhere. They were inherited from Neanderthals, especially those who lived in regions like the Zagros Mountains, where interbreeding between the two species occurred. More on this at the end of the video. The notion that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred in the Zagros region further reinforces the idea that these Neanderthals had light pigmentation. If early humans in the area carried Neanderthal genes, then the traits associated with them, blue eyes, fair skin, and lighter hair, must have been present among the Neanderthals they encountered. This genetic legacy is still visible today, woven into the DNA of people across Eurasia. The story of Shanidar is one of survival, adaptation, and human connection. The women of Shanidar were likely central to the interactions between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, whether through conflict, cooperation, or both. Their presence in this ancient landscape challenges long-held assumptions about interspecies relationships and even the appearance of our distant relatives. It forces us to reconsider the stereotypes we've inherited and look instead at the evidence, the real scientific truth behind the people who once called Shanidar home. The presence of women in this ancient Neanderthal community is undeniable, but their role remains largely speculative. Were they hunters, gatherers, caretakers, or all of the above? How did they contribute to their society? And what was their place in the interactions between Neanderthals and the early modern humans who began migrating into their territory? Adding to the complexity of Neanderthal history is the Arabia standstill hypothesis, which suggests that early modern humans lingered around the Persian Gulf for nearly 30,000 years before dispersing further into Eurasia. This theory suggests that early modern humans, after leaving Africa, did not immediately disperse across Eurasia, but instead remained in the Arabian Peninsula for tens of thousands of years, between approximately 82,000 and 55,000 years ago. During this period, interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals likely occurred, shaping the genetic makeup of future populations. This interaction zone, potentially rich with both conflict and cooperation, challenges simple narratives of human migration and highlights a prolonged period of coexistence in the region. This prolonged contact led to interbreeding, a genetic exchange that shaped the lineage of many people alive today. More on this theory later in the video. This prolonged occupation, potentially centered around what is now the Persian Gulf, allowed for significant interaction and interbreeding with Neanderthal populations in the region. According to the migration map, this period of stasis saw a mingling of Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens in a geographic corridor that would later serve as a launching point for further dispersal into Asia and Europe. The Neanderthals who lived in Shanidar faced incredible hardships, as evidenced by their skeletal remains. Shanidar Cave also holds evidence of trauma, possibly from conflicts between Neanderthals and early modern humans. One of the most famous Neanderthals found in the cave, Shanidar III, had a rib injury that suggests he was wounded by a projectile weapon, something more characteristic of early Homo sapiens technology. Was this an isolated incident, or part of a larger pattern of violence as modern humans encroached on Neanderthal territory? Did the women of Shanidar experience the consequences of these conflicts firsthand? Or were they part of the bridge between the two species, fostering relationships that led to the very interbreeding we now see in genetic data? As researchers continue to uncover new insights from Shanidar Cave, the women of this ancient community remain some of its most intriguing mysteries. Their lives, roles, and identities are waiting to be rediscovered, challenging outdated assumptions and bringing us closer to understanding the full spectrum of Neanderthal existence. For centuries, anthropologists debated whether modern humans and Neanderthals ever truly mixed, or if their encounters were purely hostile. However, the discovery of Neanderthal DNA in nearly all people today tells a different story, one of genetic exchange, survival, and perhaps necessity. By the classic definition of species, if two organisms can breed and produce fertile offspring, it means that they belong to the same species. Some would argue that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens are the same species, rather than separate species or even subspecies. 75,000 years ago, deep within the rugged terrain of the Zagros Mountains, an event took place that would change the course of human history forever. Here, beneath the cold, starlit skies, Homo sapiens, newcomers to the colder climates, encountered an ancient people who had ruled the lands of Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, the Neanderthals. Using mathematical models, some geneticists, including David Reich of Harvard University, have argued that at one point the proportion of Neanderthal DNA in humans alive today was as high as 20%, and that proportion later dwindled. That 20% figure is significant because other researchers have estimated Homo sapiens outnumbered Neanderthals 10-1, so perhaps the two clades interbred to such an extent that they merged together. Over time, however, modern humans lost significant amounts of Neanderthal DNA, perhaps because it carried harmful mutations. Yet, at least 1/5 of the Neanderthal genome may still lurk within the modern human genome. The result was a hybrid lineage, part sapiens, part Neanderthal, a new race of humans uniquely equipped to survive the brutal Ice Age landscapes of Europe and Central Asia. These mixed offspring, the children of Zagros, inherited not only the intellectual curiosity of their sapiens ancestors, but also the strength, endurance, savage ferocity and cold-weather biological adaptations of the Neanderthals. The Zagros Mountains, a towering and harsh landscape stretching through modern-day Iran, Iraq and Turkey, formed one of the first major barriers to the expansion of Homo sapiens into colder regions of Eurasia. Here the Neanderthals had already made their home, thriving in rock shelters and valleys for millennia. But when sapiens arrived, bringing with them superior weapons, complex language, and an entirely new way of thinking, the dynamic shifted. Climate and sea level changes would have favoured migrations into Eurasia. A wetter climate and lower sea levels could have enticed humans to move into the Middle East 140,000 years ago. Indeed, as Dr. David Reich has pointed out, there is no barrier between Africa and Eurasia that poses any real problem for humans to cross. Migrating within Africa, with large deserts, dense rainforests and ferocious predators, is actually more challenging than migrating out of Africa. Imagine the scene. A small band of sapiens encountering a Neanderthal clan at the mouth of Shanidar Cave. Would there have been fear, curiosity, perhaps even an attempt at communication? Did they whisper sweet nothings beneath the leaves of a cedar tree? We can only speculate. Some scholars suspect that fierce competition between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals pushed the Neanderthals from the warmer Middle East into an ice-covered Europe. The world was almost empty, one expert on human origins stated. The way I personally see this, probably most people would not agree with me, the European Neanderthals had no other choice. Regarding the intermingling of Neanderthals and modern humans, he stated, "I don't think it was a happy marriage." Nevertheless, other scientists imagine more peaceful encounters. "I imagine that when modern humans ran into some vaguely human-like thing, they thought, 'This is cool.' But I really don't know, especially since I'm not an anthropologist, I'm a geneticist." As reported in an article titled, "Were Neanderthals more than cousins to Homo sapiens?" It's easy to envision the first unions between these two groups happening through both acts of aggression and acts of companionship. The hybrid offspring born from these unions, however, would have possessed a unique advantage. Unlike their full-blood Neanderthal parents, these children inherited genetic diversity from their sapiens ancestors, making them more adaptable and fast-thinking. But unlike their fully sapiens relatives, they also carried the Neanderthal's stocky build, powerful muscles, and superior cold weather endurance. Thanks to Neanderthal DNA, the children of Zagros also had a physiological edge in icy climates. Their bodies were shorter and more compact, conserving heat efficiently. They had a tenacious, primal, unrelenting will to survive, along with a biological adaptation which helps to regulate heat and keep the body warm in frigid conditions. The result was a massive genetic fusion, a super-hybrid population that would go on to form the ancestors of Eurasian and indigenous Australian peoples. If you have European, Asian, Aboriginal, Australian, or Native American ancestry, chances are that Neanderthal blood runs in your veins. But perhaps the greatest legacy of the children of Zagros is not found in our genes, but in our very existence. Without them, the sapiens' expansion into Eurasia may have been far slower, if not impossible. Without their mixed heritage, the harshest regions of the Ice Age world may have remained unconquered by modern humans. The story of the children of Zagros is one of adaptation, survival, and biological dominance. They were not just the product of chance, but of necessity, an evolutionary leap that allowed modern humans to thrive in regions where pure-blooded modern humans could not. Their bloodline shaped the course of human history, laying the foundation for the diverse populations of Eurasia today. So the next time you feel the chill of winter, consider that somewhere deep in your DNA, a fragment of that ancient hybrid bloodline still flows through time. Indeed, whether we were one species or two does not matter because we are all one now. The Neanderthals never truly disappeared. They became us. Ever since the first Neanderthal genome was sequenced roughly 15 years ago, we've gotten hints about what Neanderthals may have looked like. For example, some early studies suggested they may have had red hair and light skin tones, but there wasn't enough evidence to say conclusively. However, over the past few years, a handful of new studies have strongly hinted that Neanderthals passed down genes to modern Europeans for not only red hair and light skin, but also blue eyes and blonde hair. Indeed, all of these genes are linked in a complicated web of interactions that is very difficult to understand. Now we have reviewed the latest studies and can confirm what the BBC has not dared to say. Neanderthals were light-skinned and also blue-eyed and red and blonde hair, and Europeans inherited these traits from Neanderthals. This is a shocking revelation to some, and has not been widely disseminated. So this may be the first time you have learned of this unequivocal fact. The authors of these studies won't speak in public about these facts, and instead choose to discuss other Neanderthal introgressed traits. But why is it that scientists discuss that Neanderthal genes affect your health and your personality? But why don't they discuss that Neanderthal genes affect your pigmentation? It's complicated. When we delve into the genetics of Neanderthals, we discover clues hidden within the ancient DNA strands. Mutations in genes like MC1R hinted at the possibility of Neanderthals with red hair and fair skin. But why would evolution favor such traits in these early humans? Was it an adaptation to the harsh, sun-deprived environments of Europe's Ice Age, where lighter skin could better synthesize vitamin D? Or was it a sign of something else, perhaps cultural, or even a result of genetic drift in smaller populations? Consider the complexity when we look at modern humans with Neanderthal DNA. Could the lighter skin tones and blue eyes in European populations be a legacy of this ancient interbreeding? This connection not only fascinates but also complicates our understanding. Were Neanderthals' pigmentation traits we see today in humans a direct inheritance, or has time and further genetic mixing changed the original palette? There's a speculative side to this story as well. What if sexual selection played a role, where lighter pigmentation or blue eyes was seen as more attractive, causing it to become more common? Or could genetic drift in isolated groups have led to unexpected variations in skin, hair, or eye color? These possibilities add layers to our understanding, suggesting that Neanderthals were not uniform but complex, much like us. Imagine standing in front of a Neanderthal, not as a figure in a museum or a sketch in a textbook, but as he or she really was. Alive, with skin, hair, and eyes that told a story of survival and adaptation. What color would that skin be? Would the hair be as dark as midnight or as fiery as the sun? Could those eyes be a piercing blue or a deep green? These questions dive into the heart of understanding Neanderthal pigmentation, a subject that blends science, history, and imagination. As science advances, each new discovery adds a brushstroke to our painting of Neanderthal pigmentation. For decades, the image of Neanderthals has been subject to manipulation, revision, and outright fraud. One of the most latest myths is regarding their pigmentation. This notion has been used to support a strict interpretation of the replacement hypothesis, which posits that modern humans are nearly 100% non-Eurasian in origin, with only small Neanderthal contributions. But is this really the case? Or is there a concerted effort by certain institutions to downplay the genetic legacy of Neanderthals in modern Europeans? Geneticist David Reich of Harvard, who led one of the studies cited in this video, has said that you could argue that non-Africans today are Neanderthals, who mixed with waves and waves of modern humans.